Morning. Committee will come to order. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here, and we'll get to you very shortly. Last week, our country recognized National Small Business Week, a time when small businesses and entrepreneurs are celebrated for the tremendous impact that they have on every community all across America. Setting aside a week to highlight the importance of small businesses serves as a reminder as to how crucial they are to our national prosperity and economic security. Here at the House Small Business Committee, we are reminded of this every day. It's often said that when small businesses succeed, America succeeds. At the very heart of small businesses, what allows them to succeed are the people, the men and women of this country who set out with an idea and the desire to turn that idea into a reality. It's this enduring spirit of American innovation that continues to breathe life into our economy and create the jobs no government program can. Today, the committee is excited to have before it what is truly an expert panel. Our witnesses today are prominent and passionate voices in the small business community all across America. Each of our witnesses have taken the lessons learned from building their own businesses and provide guidance to small business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs. The difference between a good idea and a good business is execution. And who do America's small businesses turn to for help developing and executing a business plan? They turn to J.J. Ramberg, to Ramon Ray, to Susan Solovic. I apologize. They pronounce it correctly, and they turn to her. And to Melinda Emerson. And so today, so do we. Through their work, our witnesses have helped to inspire and shape countless small businesses all across America. They have their fingers on the small business pulse and can offer unique perspectives as to the challenges small businesses owners face every day. This committee is eager to hear more about the great work our witnesses are doing to help small businesses and grow the conversation of small business success stories. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for coming here today. We will stop talking soon and turn to you all and we'll listen. But at this point, I would like to yield to our ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our nation's culture, character, and economy have always been defined by entrepreneurship. Today, 28 million small firms drive growth and create opportunity in major cities, rural areas, and every community in between. Small businesses employ over half of all private sector employees. Their hard work, innovation, and ingenuity to create new products and open new markets contributes to all economic sectors. However, forming a new business is an inherently risky undertaking, and there are many obstacles entrepreneurs face when getting started, from accessing capital to navigating an uncertain tax code to managing operations to understanding the regulatory landscape. It is not as simple as it once was to start a small business. As a result, we have seen the face of small businesses change. Small businesses have always been dynamic, but in today's world, that rate of change is accelerating. Many entrepreneurs no longer choose the traditional brick-and-mortar business model. Instead, they opt for sole proprietorship and online models that provide greater flexibility. These structures allow many entrepreneurs to launch a new venture while avoiding risks like sales revenue or cash flow that are primary concerns for more traditional firms. We're also seeing the face of entrepreneurship evolve to more accurately reflect our nation's diversity. The rate of minority and women-owned small business growth continues outpacing other business growth. Released last year, the 2012 survey of business owners found that the percentage of minority-owned firms increased from 22% to 29% over a 5-year period. Meanwhile, the number of other businesses declined by 1.1 million. Women-owned firms also experienced higher growth rates than their male counterparts as their market share increased by more than 2 million firms. These are positive trends, but minority and women-owned firms continue facing barriers to formation and growth. They find it harder to secure financing and often face unfair treatment in the marketplace from potential customers and vendors. If the economy is to benefit from the high rates of business formation and the job creation that follows, more must be done to ensure hurdles like these are removed. One role for this committee is ensuring these firms can access resources to overcome those barriers and expand opportunities for all Americans. In more than 2 decades on this committee, I have seen firsthand the ingenuity and resilience of small business owners, not only in my district, but across the nation. These firms can accomplish great things if they have the right tools. During today's hearing, some of the country's leading small business experts and advocates can provide us with useful guidance on how to better accomplish that goal. In that regard, I want to thank all the witnesses who traveled here today for their participation and valuable perspective. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Young lady yields back. Now, before I introduce the panel, no more speeches, but I'd like to just kind of inform you all about our lighting system. You all probably have been informed that you have 5 minutes each to testify. The lights there will help you to stay within it, in that if at all possible. The green light will be on for 4 minutes. The yellow light comes on to let you know you got about a minute to wrap up. The red light comes on, and we ask that you try to stay within that if at all possible. We'll give you a little flexibility, but not a whole lot, so try to stay within it. I do have a gavel up here. And but in any event, we would now like to introduce our very distinguished panel. We're pleased, as I said, to have a really fantastic group of folks here. First, we have Ms. J.J. Ramberg. Ms. Ramberg is the host of Your Business, a program on MSNBC that's dedicated to issues affecting small business owners, as well as the author of the best-selling book, It's Your Business. She's also an entrepreneur herself, co-founding Good Shop, an online platform that has forged a connection between retail savings and nonprofit and school fundraising. And we welcome you here this morning. Our second witness will be Ramon Ray. Mr. Ray is an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, author, journalist, and publisher of Smart Hustle magazine. This magazine is dedicated to telling the journey of entrepreneurs and small businesses. Mr. Ray's specialty is in working with small businesses to help them grow by better utilizing technology and marketing. Mr. Ray has traveled the nation speaking at and hosting events designed to help small business owners and entrepreneurs grow their business. Our third witness today is Ms. Susan Solovic. Ms. Solovic is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, media personality, speaker, and she's known as the small business expert. No offense to the other witnesses here today. Ms. Solovic has served on the National Women's Business Council and is a past board member of the Women's Leadership Board at Harvard University, the Women Presidents Organization, Women Impacting Public Policy, and the Institute for Economic Development of Women. We welcome you here this morning as well. And I'd now like to yield to the ranking member for the introduction of our fourth and final witness here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Melinda Emerson. Ms. Emerson, also known as the Small Biz Lady, is a leading expert in all things small business. She is the creator and host of Small Biz Chat, the longest-running live chat on Twitter for small business owners, which reaches more than 3 million entrepreneurs each week. She was named by Forbes magazine as the #1 woman for entrepreneurs to follow on Twitter. In addition to being a regular columnist for the New York Times, Ms. Emerson is the founder and president of the Quintessence Group, an award-winning marketing consulting firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as well as the founder of the Melinda Emerson Foundation, which provides mentoring and business training for minority and women entrepreneurs. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're done talking, so we'll now start our panel. And Ms. Ramberg, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Chairman Chabot and Ranking Member Velasquez and everyone for inviting me to testify today. It is a true honor, and I really appreciate having the time to speak with you all. For the last 10 years, I've had a really unique vantage point when it comes to small business and entrepreneurship, because during this time, I both founded and have grown my own company called Good Shop, and I've been the host of Your Business on MSNBC. And so through that, I've been able to interview thousands of small business owners and investors and experts to really understand best practices when it comes to small growth survival and expansion. And we were around in 2008, so we did a lot of stories on survival in those days. Now, this show was originally supposed to be on air for just 6 months, but we quickly learned that there was such a strong appetite by small business owners for advice and inspiration, and I think most importantly, just a sense that they're not alone on this journey. So now we're the longest running show on MSNBC. We've been on for 10 years. Entrepreneurship is in my blood. I am a third-generation entrepreneur on both sides of my family. My paternal grandfather moved here from Mexico, and his first job here was as a peddler, selling pots and pans and blankets door to door. He then went on to open a furniture store, which my dad took over, and then my dad opened a storage business, a document storage business, and a real estate development firm. On my mother's side, my grandfather was sort of a typical entrepreneur, always starting companies, from a tropical fish company to he was the first person to bring frozen pizza to California, and he had a tire distribution company. And my mom got the bug. So when she was in her late 40s, she partnered with my brother to start a company called JobTrack, very bootstrapped company. I spent many of my summer hours making cold calls for that company when they first launched. And 12 years after they launched, they sold that company to Monster.com. So I had a really special place by the time I started my company in 2005, because I had really had a front row seat to watching things go from idea to a business multiple times. And as I look at my own experience, and I've talked to so many small business owners around the country, I know that having that experience and having a group of people around me who are advisors, who I can ask questions of very informally, really provides a shortcut to small business growth. It can be the difference between failure and success. I do believe nothing really prepares you, even though I witnessed all these businesses, for doing it yourself. But I certainly went in with my eyes open, and I had a good group of people around me. My company, Good Shop, which I founded with my brother Ken, was conceived upon a foundation of socially responsible business. So we wanted to do good and do well. We've partnered with more than 30,000 retailers, and we provide the best coupons and deals for those retailers. And if a user selects their favorite nonprofit or school, a percentage of what they spend goes back to that cause. So now we've saved people about $100 million in savings when they're shopping, and we've donated more than $12 million to organizations large and small across the country. We now have about 60 employees, and we continue to grow. We have a number of jobs that are still open right now as we're trying to fill. But the company started just like so many other bootstrapped businesses, with me working in my one-bedroom apartment in New York City 24 hours a day, basically making calls in my pajamas, and my brother working at home at his place in Los Angeles and just working hard. It just took a lot of work to get to where we are today. Now, a few months after we launched Good Shop, I had the honor of being called by MSNBC and being brought on to launch the program Your Business. And on this show, once a week, we tackle common small business issues through profiling small businesses. And these are issues that we hear consistently across the country, regardless of industry and regardless of geography. So to give you some examples, we profiled a beauty salon in New Jersey, which was having trouble navigating the layers of regulations, local regulations, that kept them away from focusing on their growth. We told the story of a company that turns your t-shirts into blankets, and they couldn't find funding despite very initial success that they had. We interviewed a woman whose clothing business was having trouble until she met an advisor from the SCORE organization. And simply having his perspective changed everything, and her company started growing. And then finally, we've done a series of stories on main streets across America, from Brundage, Alabama, to Natchez, Mississippi. And I have seen the change that government grants can make, how money given to pave streets, help with signs outside of stores, get streetlights, flowers, can transform a main street and transform a city. And finding those champions in those areas who are able to find those grants and get the businesses to work together can transform everything. Now, I believe we are at a very exciting time for small business and entrepreneurship. I have met, as I said, true champions who have worked with small businesses to help them grow and just transform the economy of different cities around the world. And technology companies, particularly in the fintech world and the edtech world, are just beginning to address these issues of small business funding and getting an educated workforce. And so I'm excited to see what happens as these companies and these industries grow. Now, there is no doubt, as we all at this table know, that owning a small business and entrepreneurship is no cakewalk. It can be hard. There are many people who struggle, and even for those who are very successful, there are a lot of pain points along the way. Which is why I really want to thank you again for taking the time to just talk about small business success stories. Because the more attention we can pay, the more focus we can put on both the challenges of small businesses and the success of small business and the contributions of small business owners, the more we can support this very incredibly important part of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Mr. Ray, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to acknowledge my wife of 22 years, who's there, and my daughter. Oh, sorry, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge my wife of 22 years and my daughter Charity, who's over there to my left as well. And it's good to be amongst friends and experts who I've learned from over the years. Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, thank you for inviting me to represent America's small business owners and entrepreneurs at this committee hearing. I'd also like to extend a great warm greeting to the representatives from New Jersey, where I live, near Newark Airport, and those from New York, where I grew up in Brooklyn. So it's nice to see you all here as well. Starting and growing a business, as we've talked, as you all know.
You're making a lot of friends.
Oh, great. Starting and growing a business is fraught with challenges, as many of us know. I've started 4 businesses, and I've been blessed to be able to sell one of them, on the way to selling the second one. I'm an entrepreneur who is currently growing 2 companies, and one of those companies is Smart Hustle Magazine. The day-to-day challenges of business ownership includes, of course, hiring the right staff, obtaining financing, trying to get new customers, and maybe we can keep the ones we have. And also, of course, navigating government regulations, and so much more. Business ownership, it's not, of course, just about the challenges, but as many of us here on this witness know, it also comes with the sweet taste of independence, the freedom to chart our own course, the privilege of helping others with our income, and of course, earning the profitable rewards from the risks that so many small business owners and entrepreneurs take day to day. And I think the greatest reward is the awesome responsibility of providing for our families and supporting our communities, which I know all of us here do. So Chairman Chabot and fellow committee members, more important, I think, than any of us in this room, of course, are the thousands and thousands of small business owners who I'm privileged to speak to across the country on a yearly basis, and the millions of small business owners that I'm able to touch through events, through conferences, being on JJ's show, Twitter chats, and et cetera. So based on the input from this community, and I did ask, what should I tell the committee? There's 3 recommendations that they would like me to express to you today. Many of them you know, many of them you've heard, but I hope this helps to underline them. I think first is definitely a continued reduction of burdensome and I would say unnecessary regulation, sure at the federal level, but let's also try to work and help at the local and state level as well. We need regulation, absolutely, for our safety. Please make sure the plane I'm flying on tomorrow is safe. But I wonder, we don't need burdensome or unnecessary regulation. And I think, as an example that we've seen, in my opinion, the treatment of Uber, as an example, it's now a very big company, but I think that aspect at a very local level of stifling innovation and limiting growth is an example of what I think small businesses don't need. A second, I would say the reduction and simplification of taxes. I count it as a privilege that I can pay taxes, which from my hard-earned income help to fund our awesome government. However, I would dare say there's not a limit to what taxes and tax laws are fair versus which ones are excessive and burdensome. Every year, I pay thousands of dollars, now not as much as JJ and Melinda and Susan pay, but because they have a lot more money, but every year, I pay thousands and thousands of dollars in taxes, and I would rather reduce the taxes I pay and instead use those funds to grow my business and invest in my community, thus, as we said, which is investing in America. And the third aspect, the third thing that my community has said, please tell the House of Representatives, please tell the Congress men and women. Third is to foster small business education. I applaud the great work of the Small Business Administration of SCORE that I benefited from many years ago. 26 Federal Plaza, that's where I went to. SBDCs and other government-supported organizations. They support and educate small business owners. And I think the more we can invest in the education of business owners, the more we ensure that less businesses will fail and more will succeed. In particular, I applaud the great work of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. It happens to be in my backyard, but a great model, I think, that many local governments can follow. Private and for-profit education efforts, such as the Goldman Sachs 10,000, Google's Get Your Business Online, Microsoft Small Business Academy, Kauffman Foundation, and many more. These are examples of not government organization, but still in the whole sphere of educating small business owners. I was recently speaking with Robert Herjavec of Shark Tank, and we discussed that all businesses hustle. They all work hard. They grind. We all work hard. However, it's those who are educated, and I think education is so important, who have smart hustle, who succeed. Educating business owners is essential. As I conclude my statement, I think of a company like Infusionsoft, which was started by 3 friends in a strip mall, or a company like Sumo Me, started by someone who was fired by Facebook there in Austin, Texas. These companies, my company, and millions of other small businesses, they need to be encouraged to start, grow, and thrive. So I would say, let's think about the husband and wife who've just started their business together. What can we do to help them? Or a high school graduate who's now working on an invention right now to put me out of business, unfortunately. Or the laid-off 50-year-old who's forced to begin their own business. The best thing our government can do for small business owners, as I conclude, is to limit regulation, lower and simplify taxes, and continue to invest in the education of small business owners at the local, state, and federal level. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share about the hustle, as I often like to say, the smart hustle of entrepreneurship in America. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's not very often that we get called awesome around here. I can tell you. So, but thank you. Ms. Solovic, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the committee, I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today to share my insights and experiences as a small business owner and as an instructor to small businesses around the country. It's truly an honor to be here. But let me begin by sharing just a little bit about my entrepreneurial background. You see, I really had a great mother. She became an entrepreneur right after she lost her first husband in World War II, out of necessity. But she sure learned a lot, and she had a number of businesses along the way. When she married my father and moved to the town he lived in, they opened up their own funeral home. Very small, rural Missouri town, 3,000 people, now 2,099 since I've gone. So I grew up working in a family business from the time I could barely even walk. And I started my own personal journey when I was 15 years old. After waiting tables and getting blisters on my feet, I realized there had to be a much better way to make a living. So I realized I could teach little girls how to twirl a baton every Saturday morning, 75 of them in the high school gym for $1 each. I thought, this is pretty good, better than working for tips. And so then I opened up a small dance studio in my basement and taught little girls how to do ballet, tap, and jazz. And then, of course, college comes along and I move on. And I followed a traditional career path for a while. I had a lot of success there. I was one of the first female executives in a Fortune 50 company in their financial services division. I'm also, Chairman Chabot, like you, an attorney, and I got to work with many small business owners setting up their legal entities and structures. I also did quite a bit of franchise law during that time. So I've worked with small businesses in many capacities, but my heart has always been in my own entrepreneurial endeavors. I truly enjoy being my own boss. I like making deals happen. I like making money. And I like seeing it all come together, birthing those entrepreneurial activities and watching them grow. And I, too, have had the opportunity to sell a business in 2009, right toward the end of the recession. So I was very fortunate. My business continues to prosper. Unfortunately, as I talk to small businesses around the country, many of them are saying they're discouraged and disheartened. They're struggling. We know now that the number of small business closures is exceeding small business startups. That is a critical issue for the recovery of our economy. And the Capital One Spark Business Barometer just noted that small business confidence is down almost 10 points from where it was this time last year. Businesses are struggling. They tell me their business dreams have now turned into nightmares, and that's sad. So I have now created a process I call the 1% Edge. It's a process to get small businesses growing again. It's to help them become and place innovation into the DNA of their companies. Because we all know now what's cool and hot today is obsolete tomorrow. And if you're doing business the same old way you've always done it, you're falling behind just from when you get started. I got the idea when I was teaching an MBA class on entrepreneurial growth strategies. And I had a co-professor because I travel quite a bit. The co-professor would stand there and talk about case studies. He'd put big formulas on the board. And then I would stand up to the class and say, now let me tell you how it really works. Because if you're studying case studies in today's marketplace that is changing so rapidly, you're behind the 8 ball. As someone once said, if you're just now jumping on the bandwagon, you're too late. You already missed it. So we've got to give entrepreneurs the opportunity to be innovative, not just in their product and service delivery, but in their internal process and systems as well. Technology is certainly changing the leveling the playing field for small businesses, yet we need to get them to embrace it. And I love to see small businesses using social media now because it gives them an opportunity to broadcast their brand. And personally, I had an advertising agency at one point in time, and people used to say to me, I don't have money to market my business. Now they say to me, I don't have time to market my business. The world is changing. And before I run out of time, I do want to deliver another personal story. Ramon talked about regulations. I know you hear it all the time. And in today's news, we're talking about the increase in the overtime pay. My parents in that little funeral home had ambulance service for many years. It wasn't a profit center. It was a service to the community. The Department of Labor sent an auditor in and audited my parents and decided whenever our hearse had a stretcher in it, it was covered by the wage and hour law. Whenever it was a hearse, it wasn't. Well, what happened is he extrapolated all the back pay my parents owed their 3 or 4 employees, told them they had 2 years to sue, and told them how to do it. Unfortunately, because it wasn't a moneymaker for my parents, they didn't pay, no one sued, but they, like many funeral homes, quit the ambulance service. My little small town community in rural Missouri had no service for many years until the hospital decided to take it over. So while I think that policies and regulations, as Ramon said, are good, and they're always passed with the best intentions at heart, I think sometimes we don't take time to understand the effects and the far-reaching effects that it has, not only on small businesses and jobs, but on our communities as well. And I do believe that today, that we're living in a world where entrepreneurship is still great. This country was built on the spirit of entrepreneurship. And God love us all, it's still the greatest country in the world. And thank you all to the wonderful public service you do to help us and grow our businesses. I also want to applaud you for your efforts in your bipartisan efforts to get some victories through in terms of legislation. You are helping us. We appreciate what you do, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you very much. With the way I mispronounced your name, you have every right to call me Cabot or anything.
I'm sorry.
Quite all right. Quite all right.
Why couldn't we be simple like Smith or Jones,
There
know?
you go. That's all right. Ms. Emerson, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Chairman Chabot and the Ranking Committee Member Velasquez and the rest of the Small Business Committee. I truly am grateful for this opportunity to share with you what I think is the status of small business in the United States. My name is Melinda Emerson, but my nickname worldwide is Small Biz Lady. And my mission is to end small business failure. And every single thing I do, every blog post I write, every book I have written, every interview I give is about giving people nuggets that they may not even know will potentially befall them as they start a small business. You know, the funny thing about being a small business expert is I rarely hear bad business ideas. Unfortunately, however, I see poor business execution everywhere. It's like the cold and the flu, right? It's kind of everywhere. And I have to agree with my colleagues that there are 4 major things that I think we need to help small businesses with. Number 1 is access to credit and capital. A lot of the reasons why small business can't get capital is because they have poor credit. I also think they need training, they need education, and we need to talk about the best ways that the government can help do that. Certainly there is SCORE, there is the SBA, there is the Small Business Development Centers, there are PTAC centers, and there's some great work going on in these centers. However, there's some quality control issues. Depending on what city you're in, depends on how good the services are in your city, and I think we need to do more with that. I also think that we need to look at how we can help entrepreneurs get access to networks, particularly minority and women entrepreneurs. We didn't go to the business schools that other people go to. So when the major decision on whether or not you get private equity funding had to do with whether or not you went to the same B school as the people doing the funding decision, I think we need to look at different ways that equity can be done. I'm aware of programs that sort of like how SBIR grants and things are done. There are organizations, nonprofit organizations that have been given funds from the government to do equity investment. So it's not just about, going and form a pitch board and having the right deck and the right idea and the right management team. I mean, there's other ways to get private equity capital in the hands of businesses that so desperately need it. I also think we need to look at mentorship. Mentorship is essential. The work that SCORE does is God's work, as far as I'm concerned. I believe that SCORE has made the difference in so many. I am from Philadelphia, so I do have to give a shout out to SCORE Philadelphia. They have done an amazing job, and anytime I can help them, I do. But we do know that there's differences in other markets. So I do think that mentorship, networking, access to capital, and then just access to opportunities. I think if we look at the work that the government does and all the things that the government spends, I do think we need to enforce the set-asides, and it's not just enough for people to make a best effort. I think we need to start holding people accountable for missing their goals for set-asides for minorities, women, veteran-owned, as well as 8A set-aside contracts. I also think that when these contracts are given or when people are partnered with prime contractors, we need to make sure they get paid, because one of the biggest issues that befall small businesses of all types, creeds, and colors is getting paid. And that's whether they were doing business with corporations or doing business, alongside a prime for a government contract, or frankly, doing business directly with the government. Getting small businesses paid net 30 or faster through electronic funds transfer needs to become the standard, and not something that if you have the right relationship, you can make happen. So I think if we look at some of those things, I think that we will go a long way in making sure that we grow America's small businesses. Now, I want to address Committee Member Velasquez, I wanted to address your excitement about the numbers of minority and women-owned businesses that have been started over the last 5 years. And while those numbers have grown, the revenues of those businesses have not. So if you look at just women-owned businesses, for example, Asian American women's businesses, on average, their revenue is $330,000. African American women businesses, on average, startup revenue is $38,000. What is the poverty number? You know what I mean? So when you look at what's really going on, a lot of these people are starting businesses because they got washed out in the recession. They still haven't been able to find a job. So they're starting, what I call side hustle businesses for cash. They're not really starting businesses that are going to scale. They're not starting businesses that are going to be able to hire employees if we don't give them some infrastructure. So I also think that when we look at models of things that we want to do to help small businesses, we need to look internationally. I have had the opportunity to travel as a small business lady around the world, and I see other countries approach entrepreneurship as their strategic advantage in their company, in their country. If you look at Singapore, for example, they invest $50 million a year in youth entrepreneurship. They have a mall in the heart of their equivalent to Rodeo Drive just for youth entrepreneurs. And young entrepreneurs as young as 10 years old can get a stall in this mall and sell their products and services. And they consider youth entrepreneurship up to 35 years old. And they are strategically funding entrepreneurs and training entrepreneurs that young. If you look at China, I had the opportunity to travel in October to Hangzhou, which is the Silicon Valley of China. They have a place called Dreamtown. If your business qualifies to get into Dreamtown, you get office space in there for 3 years. And they have a $300 million fund to put equity into these businesses. Other countries are taking entrepreneurship very seriously. If you look at Startup Chile, for example, Startup Chile will give you $40,000 and a place to stay for a year if you're willing to go to Chile and start your business. Well, Startup America is a PR campaign that at best you might network with some people if you go to one of their events. I think we need to get serious about entrepreneurship and these programs, because I do believe it is a competitive advantage. I have a 10-year-old son who tells me all the time, Mommy, I don't need to go to 4th grade. I already know how to make money. I'm like, well, sweetheart, I need you to know how to count money. So I need you to go to school. But my point simply is that I think we need to bolster programs like Junior Achievement, like the National Foundation of Teaching Entrepreneurship, particularly in our urban decaying schools that are struggling anyway. And when we look at our ex-offender population coming out, we need to teach these people how to start businesses because they're not going to be able to get jobs anyway. I do believe that entrepreneurship is the difference, and it is my passion. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come here today to talk to you about what we need to do to help America's small businesses.
Thank you very much. I have to say, as chair of this committee, if this isn't the best testimony we've had from a panel, it's certainly out or near the top. Well done. All four of you were great. I kept thinking, that was great, and then that was maybe even better, and it just, this was really, really good. So well done. Yeah, yeah. Maybe we should just not ask questions and let you all talk. But we wouldn't do that. We're politicians after all. That's right. So I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes, and we'll move around here. So I'll begin with you, Ms. Ramberg, if I can. What are some of the top questions that you're asked by small business folks who ask you for advice, either on the street or on your TV program, or what do they ask you, and what do you tell them? A couple of things.
We get questions, it runs the gamut, right? How do I find money? How much money is it going to take for me to start my small business? How do I find good employees? We get very granular, so it could be, how do I fire my first employee? And I think, how do I get an IP lawyer, right? Where do I find a company to develop my website? I get questions across the board, but I think what it speaks to is the fact that all of us have mentioned there needs to be small business education. We are not reinventing the wheel. Any problem that you as a small business owner are dealing with, someone else has. So for instance, I belong to this organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and we meet once a month where we talk about our business issues. And it is an extreme shortcut for me to get to an answer about an issue that I am facing. And so we need to create these networks, again, as Melinda just said, for everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, I'll go to you next. I had a prepared question, but I thought of something I thought would be more interesting. So I'm going to ask you something maybe a little off the wall, but I had the opportunity to meet not only with you in my office before this, but also with your beautiful wife and your daughter Charity. And I don't know if Charity is interested in going into small business someday, but if you had to give her advice on how to be successful down the road, how to prepare yourself, and what kind of things you ought to be thinking about if you want to be successful in life or small business, what would you tell your daughter?
I do advise her quite a bit to her angst, unsolicited. And I think there's a few things. And it's interesting you asked that, because that's a question that many people ask me. You see me on stage and et cetera, and it's very simple. I think one, and this is not really small business advice, but for me, I find just being nice to people, and making connections. Because there's some people who you come in contact with, I'm sure we've all met them, there are some slime bucket, nasty people out there. And you can't succeed unless you have a smile or a nice. That's one.
That's kind of similar to the field that most of us are in up here, too. We would never say which ones are which category, but people usually figure that out on their own.
And the second thing I share with my daughter, you can ask her, I share with her and my son as well, make connections. Because the only thing different from me being here today, or we're on the panel, and anybody else, is the connections I've made. So being nice, making connections, looking for and taking advantage of opportunities. And I think the third thing I would say is that, going back to the grit or the hustle, the hard work, is love to be punched in the face, get back up, ask for more, but learn. So my point is being able to innovate. You're not going to get it right the first time. Those are the three things I would say.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Slovic, I'll go to you now. You mentioned you had 75 kids that you taught years ago. I don't know if you've kept in touch with any of those or not, but did any of those young ladies ever become small business people or end up in careers that might be of interest to folks?
It's interesting. The little town I grew up in is very depressed. And unfortunately, most of the young people don't get out of that town. Very few people from there go to college. In fact, when I was growing up there, it had the highest illiteracy rate of any area in the state of Missouri. So it's a very depressed community. But I do keep up with some of them on Facebook. They seem like they're doing well. They're married with children of their own. I realize, I could easily be a grandmother, not a problem. But they're doing well. And while we are talking about young women, though, I want to dovetail on something Melinda said, and that is growth capital for women-owned businesses. I know that the Title III regulations go into effect on Monday. I think that's great for the crowdfunding source. But to really grow a large organization and scale it, you have got to get venture capital. And it's very tough for most small businesses to get VC money. And it's particularly difficult for women-owned businesses. So I started one of the first video-based internet sites, and I did raise venture capital. But I didn't go to a pedigree school, an Ivy League school. I wasn't from one of the coast. I was from the Midwest. And the fact that I was a woman was a big hindrance. And I will actually tell you the first venture forum I ever participated in, one of the men said, well, you're the only woman who's presenting and was asked to present here, but we sure are glad you're good looking. And I wanted to say, seriously? Who would have said that to a man? It was so inappropriate, but there is tremendous bias, and it's something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. I'm almost out of time. Ms. Emerson, very quickly, most of the folks here on the panel mentioned SCORE and how important that's been or they've seen. Would you want to comment on SCORE and what you've seen as far as its...
I'm a huge fan of what SCORE does, and I have participated many times as a presenter for SCORE webinars.
And for the this, you might see this as being for the tens of people that are watching this. Would you tell those folks what SCORE is?
Oh, I'm sorry. SCORE stands for the Society of, I think, Service Corps of Retired Executives. Thank you. So it is an organization of folks that mentor and help, and they work with businesses face-to-face or online, and they have an amazing website full of resources at score.org, and it is a really treasured, valuable resource here in the United States for small business owners.
Thank you. And just for the record, we've heard the same thing from lots of folks, too, about how important SCORE has been to them. And yes,
Can I make one comment on that? Yeah. She mentioned their online training, which is very well developed. The feedback I've gotten from some people, though, who have gone to SCORE is it's very diverse in times the quality of mentoring you get.
You can get somebody really good.
Right, or somebody, yeah.
It depends on what city you're in. I do think that, you know, there's some hit and miss there, and that was what I was alluding to earlier about some quality control challenges. But, you know, SCORE Philadelphia is awesome.
All right. Thank you very much. Again, great panel. My time's expired. The ranking member from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, and I would like to add that the SCORE reauthorization was reported out of our committee, and it was Ms. Adams, the author of that legislation. So I'm glad to hear how you really cherish the contribution that they do, and they are a resource partner with SBA, the Small Business Administration. I would like to hear from Ms. Rambert and Ms. Emerson. You know, and you mentioned this, small businesses, the face of small businesses is changing. We have more women, more minorities, and younger people, right? So not everyone experiences the same struggles when starting or growing a business. This day, entrepreneurs not only facing general startup challenges, but also student debt. How can we best help them overcome both of those challenges?
Well, when it comes to student debt, I think we should make public universities free in America. I think that might be a very good thing to do, because I do not believe that the amount of money folks pay to go get higher education could at all possibly equate with the value of that education after they get it. Now, in terms of how can we help more minority small businesses, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. We have to have different diverse pools of equity funding available. We have to encourage public-private partnerships. There are major corporations with foundations who have entrepreneurship as a goal. They could partner with major cities in America and run business plan competitions. And one of the things that I benefited from in my business was back the third year I was in business, I won the minority business plan competition in Philadelphia. I won $20,000 and free office space for 1 year in a business incubator called the Enterprise Center in Philadelphia. And that was a game changer for me. That allowed me to hire my very first employee, and I've been in business for 17 years. So there are all kinds of things that can be done to help, but everybody's got to be on the same sheet of music to make sure that people are getting money to seed their ideas.
Thank you. Ms. Rambert, can you comment on what are the greatest obstacles facing students and recent graduates as they try to get their companies off the ground?
Money and education. It's as simple as that, right? You need to have an idea for a company, and you need to know how to grow it. I cannot tell you how many companies I've gone into and I ask something about their financials, and this is not just the youth, actually this is everyone, and they cannot quote them to me. They can't cite their financials. They don't understand. I said, what's your revenue? They can't give me a number. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to go into someone, whether that's an angel investor, a bank, any kind of funder, and get money. So it starts with education. Once you have that and people understand, and also an education around testing to understand that there is a true market for their business out there, right? We are dreamers. We sit around and we come up with ideas and we just believe that it's going to work. And so really understanding how to test whether there is a true market, someone's going to pay you for that, is something that every small business owner, entrepreneur needs to understand. And once they have tested it, then you need to build out their networks and help them get face-to-face with funders.
Thank you.
And Congresswoman Velasquez, can I add something to that? One of the other things I think would benefit, very early on when I started my first business, I got a $25,000 loan from an SBA-backed fund called the Competitive Edge Loan Program. In addition to the $25,000 I got 25% of that loan in technical assistance. My first accountant and my first marketing consultant came from those resources that were paid for through that SBA loan fund. We need more programs like that because it's not just the money, it's the technical assistance.
Well,
that these folks
we
need.
do have micro lending, under SBA, and it's both. It's access to capital, right, and it's technical assistance. And by the way, when we look at the default rate, it's the lowest of any of the loan programs that we have in place, and 62% of those borrowers are low-income women. Mr. Ray, for those businesses without large operating budgets, word-of-mouth advertising is all they have. What more can be done to bring together small businesses and end users of their products?
One of the things, thank you for asking the question. I think one of the things I talk about a lot is personal branding. I don't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of money. I don't know if I have a lot of money or not, Ronnie. I have my wife. But my point is I didn't have a lot of money.
Just for the record, his wife is shaking her head. No, they don't have a lot of money. Or not enough. Never enough.
Yes, and Ranking Member Velasquez, I think the biggest thing is building their personal brand. I think you need money, that's helpful. But those who don't, if you network like heck, if you build your personal brand, leverage the power of social content, video, you can rock it and do quite a bit. I've built my brand quite a bit with just a video camera, my smartphone, and just tweeting.
Ms. Lovick, would you like to comment?
I totally agree with what Ramon is saying. As I said, people say to me, I don't have time to do it. You don't have time not to do it. It's a great way to build your brand. And I was an early adopter of social media, and I remember after I sold my business and I was starting out again all over, and I would sit there and tweet things out and post things on Facebook, and my husband would say to me, you're wasting your time doing that. That's just silly. You should be making sales calls. Well, today, I don't have to do any outbound marketing. Everything comes to me and walks in the door simply because, as Ramon was saying, I've built my personality brand. I have a huge following. I'm always listed in the top 5 of small business experts to follow on Twitter. And yeah, it takes some time. It takes authenticity. You can't job it out to anybody else. They want to know it's you. They want to talk to you. And it's a great advantage for a small business because large companies who are out there, it's great. They're building their brand too, but they're not humanized. They need people like us to talk to the small business market, and that's what we do best.
Thank you very much. Ladies, time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukamar, who's vice chairman of this committee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Ramberg, I was interested in your comments a minute ago. I think, somebody sit across the table from a lot of people who are aspiring entrepreneurs and try and find ways to help them. It's what you said is really quite accurate from the standpoint that entrepreneurs quite oftentimes are people with big ideas. They're the folks who can dream and think outside the box, can see a niche, see an opportunity, or sometimes they're maybe left brain, but their right brain part of it, they don't understand the business part of this, how to set up a financial plan. You just said a minute ago that they couldn't give you the statistics off their P&L. So that's where it's important for them to have access to that education, to be able to understand there is a flip side of this, or be able to go find people who can help them do that. And I think your comments are very apropos here from the standpoint that in order for those entrepreneurs to grow, they've got to have the ability of people to help them through the myriad of rules, regulations, access to capital. A number of you have talked about that this morning, and I think you mentioned it a minute ago. So What do you propose to people who have access to capital problems? What is your advice to those people on how they can go find money or present themselves in a way to be able to access themselves to the kind of money it takes to be able to get a business started?
Well, I do a number of work with people who are going to talk to angel investors. We have a number of angel investors who come on the program, and so help them in sort of organizing their thoughts down so that they can present their elevator pitch in a way that will at least pique somebody's interest. We also talk a lot about just alternative financing, right? So all of these fintech companies on debt capital and the lending club, and thinking about factoring. So think beyond a traditional bank loan if you're not in a position to get one, and look into some of these other ways to get money. But I also talk a lot to people about bootstrapping. Mm-hmm. My company was bootstrapped. My mom's company was bootstrapped. The company that I mentioned, which turns T-shirts into blankets, was also bootstrapped. If you can get yourself to a certain position where you have a little bit of success, it'll be much easier to get money on down the road.
Very good. Ms. Solovic, where in Missouri are you from? I'm Missourian.
Fredericktown, Missouri.
Oh, yes, very good. I was guessing southeast Missouri from the comments you made, but
yeah.
Okay, very good. Nice little town. Been there many times. Not in my district, but still a good place.
Thank you. It's a good place to be from.
Good place to be from. Well, that's okay. It's nice to go back home there, too. You talked quite a bit about some of the, again, going on some of the comments that I addressed to Ms. Ramberg here. What do you see, well, the folks that you talk to with regards to me, this access to capital is really key to being an entrepreneur off the ground. You've got to be able to get the money to make it work. It's what greases the skids, what makes it all. What's your advice to people to be able to get them to be able to take that idea to the next step?
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on your comment, because I think that when people come to me and they want to know, where's the money, show me the money, or I'm just going to go out and get an SBA loan, I'm like, well, good luck with that, because most of us bootstrap. We use our own personal assets, credit cards, and go to family and friends for loans. And so when people tell me, well, I have this idea and I would be able to make this business really go if I could just get some money, I want to say to them, you know what? You don't want to do it very badly. Because if you really have a passion, as my mama used to say, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you really want to make it happen, you can start and make it happen. With technology today, the barrier to entry is so minimized, and you've got information and resources right at your fingertips. The one thing that I get a little alarmed about is the professional advice from attorneys. I've seen a lot of mistakes that come offline from going to those kinds of resources. But, you know, it's there, it's available. And you might not be able to start as big as you want. You may have to shrink your plan a little bit. But by golly, if you're willing to have that passion and put forth that sweat equity, you can make it happen.
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Ray.
Yes, sir.
You talked about one of the things that you're talking about here is reduction and simplification of taxes. Can you give me some example of where you'd like to see some reduction and simplification, how it would work, and what the advantage would be to small businesses?
Sure. Having said that, I'm not a tax expert by far. I'm a personal branding expert.
We want your ideas.
Yes.
You're the entrepreneur
Yes.
here. We're the guys that are supposed to make this all happen. Right?
I went through a tax audit a few years ago. When the IRS called me, she had a southern accent, so I assumed that she was my friend and she was the best person in the world. So she said, Mr. Ray, we'd like to come to your home and all this. And IRS is great. They do great work. We need to pay our taxes. But my point being is that I wish that half the problem was my own. I wish that I had better advice and taken better advice, as many of us said. So that's one. But point two, just going through that process, the arduous process of the letters and the writing and the audit, it was exhausting. Thankfully, I had my tax attorney. We had to go through it. So by that, what I mean is that my industry is just content. But imagine the industries that deal with other things, manufacturing, et cetera. There's a lot of things they have to go through just to pay taxes if they don't do it right. Then there's things they have to go through to get it right. So that's the example of what I mean by making it a bit easier for small businesses to pay taxes and to rectify if something goes wrong.
The gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Hahn, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Chabot and Ranking Member Velasquez, for holding this hearing. You know, small businesses truly are the backbone of this nation. I represent a district in Los Angeles County, and I see firsthand the hard work of thousands of small businesses to take to achieve that American dream that so many of you are speaking about today. And I think this committee is really one of the most important committees in Congress because 99% of all businesses in the United States are small business. And during my time on this committee, one of the things I focused on is women and minority-owned businesses because that is the makeup of my district back in Los Angeles. And we brought many women and minority small business owners together for roundtables with SBA workshops. And we have in my hometown a number of successfully women-owned businesses. Some of the San Pedro favorites are the Omelet and Waffle Shop, a new coffee shop called Sirens, and a clothing store called Dramatique. And while these businesses have been flourishing in my district, I was a little bit disheartened to learn that the percentage of women starting small businesses has been declining over the past 20 years. A recent study by the Kauffman Foundation found that the share of women startups fell from 43% in 2010 to 36% in 2015, which is close to a 2-decade low. The decline is even more evident among younger women, where the average number of businesses started by young women has decreased by 27% since 1996. I think there's a variety of reasons for the decreasing number of women starting businesses. According to one Wall Street Journal, women have less access to capital, are erroneously perceived as less competent than men, and have less confidence when it comes to their success and potential failure. So I was just going to ask those of you who are here today, how can we get more women to start businesses? What should this committee and SBA do to address a problem that you might see happening out there? And I'd be interested in hearing all of your responses to this.
Well, I would just say that if you want to target more women business owners, particularly younger women business owners, we have to start talking about entrepreneurship much earlier in their educational cycle. I do believe that, you know, elementary school is not too early to start teaching principles of entrepreneurship. And thus we make it so that they understand that it is a potential idea as a career option. And it's not just about going to college and getting some good job. You know, that just doesn't exist anymore. So I think that it's about helping people learn skills that are valuable much earlier. I also think it's about more targeted programs. We need an incubator for women entrepreneurs. We need funding specifically targeting minority and women entrepreneurs. And we also need to make sure they're not fronts for their husbands. There's a lot of stuff going on around, you know, folks self-certifying, you know, that they're women-owned. And we really need to make sure that it's actually for a woman-owned business. It's actually run by a woman. But I think that if we start doing targeted programs, targeted business plan competitions, you know, that kind of stuff will help get the numbers up and really give them a boost, because it needs to have money attached to it. You know, $5,000 is enough money to get in trouble. That's not enough money to run a business, right? So we need to make sure that when we do business plan competitions and stuff like that, the prize money is $20,000, $25,000, $50,000. You know, that it's real money that's going to make a difference in these people's businesses.
Thank you.
I would like also just to note that I think it is education, because I think a lot of women start businesses because they're good at what they do. It's a little craft, it's a little something, but they're really not educated on how to build a scalable and sustainable enterprise. And I also will say that I mentioned I raised venture capital. So after I did that in 2006, I wrote a book called The Girl's Guide to Building a $1 Million Business, because I figure if I could do it, anybody ought to be able to do it. It's not brain surgery. And at that time, only 3% of women-owned businesses were grossing over $1 million a year. According to a recent Forbes magazine article, only 2% of women-owned businesses gross over $1 million a year. And $1 million isn't very much when you're talking about revenue. And so, you know, I think in working with some women's organizations too, when I talked about making money in business, if you're not going to make money, go volunteer. And they say to me, well, I don't want to make $1 million. I don't need that much money. And they don't want to talk about the money part. You know what? You got to talk about the money part. That's what it's about. So I think there are stereotypes that still say to women in this country that making money, being aggressive, being successful just isn't feminine. You know, we shouldn't worry our pretty little heads about money, honey. And we've got to change that psychology. It's an undercurrent that still ripples through this country.
I would just add and say two things, being the minority on the panel here of women, no pun intended. I would say two things. I would say, one, the focus could be not only in starting businesses, but I would encourage my women friends, also those who've already started, how can we encourage them to grow? So, the number of who's starting, but let's say starting or not, those who are in it, what can we do to succeed that? And two, I would say, working with small business owners in large, many of them women entrepreneurs, I would say also there has to be some element of, without putting my foot in my mouth, getting out of the bubble of just being for women, if that makes sense. Meaning, I talk to many women entrepreneurs. I'm a women-owned business, and it's for women. I do something for women, where this world is beyond just women. You know what I mean? So it's kind of reverse.
It is?
Sometimes it's in a
Are
bubble.
you sure about that?
Yeah.
I know. I didn't.
Does that make sense what I'm trying to express?
I'm not going to touch this debate here.
Did I say that okay?
One
Yeah, Ms.
thing,
Ramberg, go ahead.
it's examples, right? When you see a successful woman, you see that you can do it. And so the more it's amazing that there are 3 women on this panel, but the more we can show that women are successful. I'm in New York, and in New York City, there is a burgeoning and very exciting community around female entrepreneurship, and there are lots of conferences and lots of mentorship, and I think that's what it takes. Again, it's about a community.
Thank you.
Could I add one more comment?
Go ahead.
All right. So,
I've lost complete control.
You know,
Go ahead.
so I have to share this
As long as
story
you
'cause I
pronounce my
think-
name right.
All right. What was that again? Chabot? Yeah. So I did some consulting for a very, very large financial services firm, and I won't mention their name here, on how to reach the women business owner market. And they sent me around all around the country to talk to their regional sales forces, and I was giving the statistics that we've just discussed here, and women growing businesses and all of that. And I happened to be down south, and I won't say what state it was either, but we broke for lunch, and one of the investment counselors came over, and he said, "Oh, there, pretty lady. Well, you did a nice job, but I just don't believe those numbers." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Why, no. The only reason a woman goes into business for herself is because her husband wants to give her something to do or he needs a tax write-off."
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my time has expired, and I
Yeah,
appreciate
long-
I appreciate the indulgence on this question.
Long ago, but that's okay. This was great. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I must say this is an awesome hearing. I am learning a lot, and I'm really inspired, and appreciate that very much. And I know our middle daughter, who's interested in going into business, she's going to find this link very informative and inspiring. And I think she'll probably be looking up some of your shows and everything like that going forward. Mr. Ray, I was very interested to hear your comment. You were using Uber as an example, really as a sort of a counterexample. And what I'd like to hear is your thoughts on, if we had a do-over, how might federal and state, perhaps even local, governments approach that issue in a manner that would certainly make sure that justice, safety, and public health is preserved, but at the same time really facilitates a good idea that's something that's really being demanded in the market?
Being the travel expert that I am not, from my observation, as one who's used Uber before, and taking them an example, then I'll move quickly to another point, but as one who's used Uber and one who's used taxis, and there's both sides of this equation. We know there's a public debate, good and bad, and et cetera. Regulation obviously is important. But I think what I found, at least in New York, being a few minutes from Newark Airport, is that you have the taxi industry that was the one bemoaning and complaining and et cetera about it, which has a valid point. New York City, a lot of big taxi industry. But I just think I saw that with Uber. This is a small, innovative company. This is a car-sharing service. Small business owners. When I go to Newark Airport from my home, there's guys who say, I'm using Uber to make more money. So just from my simple observation, clearly it's a company that is helping in some way, and we could do more. Mayor Baraka, I think in Newark, he made a deal with them. So I think we could do more to ensure citizens are protected, but while having innovation go as much as it can until it becomes a danger, like the airlines or something that has to have some, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful. And did any other panelists want to make any comment on that before I move on to the next?
I just think whenever we get in the business of trying to protect one industry to prevent another one from growing, I just think that's a slippery slope for us to get on. In Philadelphia, there was also a nightmare fight, with the taxi authority and the city with Uber. And I just felt like it was, if the taxi drivers had did a better job, Uber wouldn't have a chance. And I just think they should be like any other business, and they should face competition like anybody else.
I really appreciate those remarks. And, the last question I have, has to do with access to credit and capital, which you all hit on in one form or another. And with Ms. Solovic's comments about as far as really being self-starters and finding ways and working with family, agreeing with all of that, I'm also interested in hearing your assessments as to Dodd-Frank, as to how well it's going, or challenges that have emerged as it relates to access to capital and credit.
I'd have to say that what we've seen is, as a result, is that the level of lending, traditional lending, has really decreased to small business owners. There was a time, I think, during the recession that we heard a lot, or at least I did, from small business owners that they weren't even applying for the loans because they didn't want the debt. But then also, I think there was that fear factor that their financial statements weren't as strong as they had been, and that they just wouldn't qualify. So what did it matter to try? But here we are now with some recovery going on in the economy, and you would think we would see a change in that, but we're not. And so I think, as I said earlier, the crowdfunding platforms, the Title III regs, I think all of that is a positive step for small businesses. But I do think that more education, as we keep saying, so that people understand, and more examples of how you can get a business off the ground without going out and putting yourself into debt with a bank or a lending program. Personally, when I started my internet company, I took out a big credit line on my house, and we were totally self-funded originally. And I remember going in the venture capitalist. We were in front of Sequoia, and they looked at my numbers and they said, well, you need more eyeballs on your website. And I said, but we're profitable. Look at my financial statements. And they said, we don't care about that. I'm like, if you were funding it out of your own pocket, you would, by gosh. So I think education's important.
If I could just add, I think that when it comes to access to credit and capital, the first indication, small businesses knew the recession was coming before the recession hit everyone else, because banks started rescinding people's lines of credit, and they started turning them into term loans, and that people have not recovered from that. So what has happened now is the people that were able to hang on and stay in business, they're not credit worthy. And so what has happened is now we have these cash flow lenders that have popped up, and who are preying on businesses that can't get capital anyplace else. So, they're happy to fund you at, if you've got a 600 or 620 credit score, at 24 or 25% interest. So I think that if there's any place where you guys do need to start regulating, is those people. These cash flow lenders out here are to me, are snake oil salesmen preying on people who need cash, and they're only willing to even do loans for e-commerce businesses that are doing 10 grand or more a month. So I think that there's, and also too, just one thing about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding's great if you've got a great product business and some sharp marketing. But the average crowdfunding campaign makes $10,000. That's a hard way to make $10,000. And I do think Title III is going to help more people be able to get into that business. But I also think that's a little bit of a panacea, right? Mm-hmm. The deal is, if you want to start a small business in America, your money's going to come from your right or your left pocket. So you better have taken care of your savings, protected your credit. Hopefully you own property that you can take out a home equity loan against, because that is really what it's going to take, because banks do not loan money to start up businesses until you can prove you don't need it. So that's it.
I'm also very concerned about the new calculations, and I'm not an expert on this, but where someone leaves a company, they take a 401k plan, and then they flip it and make it a 401k in their company, and then they deplete those funds to start their business. We've got more baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer, and we've got retirement issues in this country, and I'm so fearful that people go out and bet the family farm, and then what happens? Because you know what? Your challenges of starting a business, your likelihood of success, you might as well go throw the dice out in Las Vegas. It's just about as good odds.
Well, unfortunately, my time has expired. I just want to congratulate each and every one of you on your personal successes, and also thank you for sharing those stories, for inspiring so many others. Chairman, I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm starstruck with this panel. Thank you guys for being here. Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing such a distinguished panel, and it's great to hear from. First of all, you're all excited about what you do, and I think enthusiasm is one of those things that any business or whatever you're doing, that you have to have enthusiasm, and to see people like you're all role models for people out there. So thank you for being here and for what you've done for small businesses in our industry. Mr. Ray, I want to just briefly touch with you, and I hadn't intended to ask you a question, but I'm so appreciative that you brought your family, because it's much like serving in the military or anything else. Whether you're a small business or anything else, it's a family deal. You're all involved and engaged, not using someone else's name like other people have mentioned, but to have people who are involved and they're a part of that. And you gave your daughter some great advice. I found in life relationships and leveraging those and understanding those is one of the greatest things you can ever have, is the capital in people. So do you want to comment any more on that, Mr. Ray?
Just to thank you for having us, and I think that, yes, family is important. I think that two things I would say: education, as we've said, education solves many problems, but definitely family. And I think, thank God for my wife. Not that she's always right. But she.
Whoa, it's going to be a long ride home.
However, she is right most of the time, and I'm very happy that she's given me advice in business, but also the things around business that make us successful. So I'm very thankful for her.
And then Miss Ramberg, although not in my district, Natchez, Mississippi is in Greg Harper from my state's district. And you noted in your testimony several consistent themes that you found in various cities that were part of the Main Street series. First, for those who may not be familiar with the series, will you briefly share about the series and particularly about the Natchez visit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone around the country and visited main streets across the country: Natchez, Mississippi, Galena, Illinois. We were just in Daytona, Brundage, Alabama, to just try and get kind of a temperature check on what's going on Main Street. And what we found consistently is the main streets that were revived. Over and over, we heard the story of big box stores moved in or factories closed, Main Street shut down. It became, lots of shut down businesses, crime. The main streets that were able to revive almost to a main street was because of one person or one organization that organized everyone. Because the fact is, running a business is hard, and it takes all of your time. And so if you have to concentrate on running your business and then also reviving Main Street, it's hard. And so these main streets have had a person or an organization who did that for them. And so it was pretty interesting. I think another interesting and important thing to note about this that we learned on Main Street is that I also have done a very informal poll of companies that I interview and just say, do you feel like anyone's looking out for you? And we almost always hear no. And I know this committee does a lot. I know the SBA does a lot. I know there are a lot of organizations that are out there trying to help small business. But somehow it is not trickling down, so that small businesses across this country often feel very alone and unsupported. And I think there needs to be some education and some public relations around the resources that are available to them. We all know SCORE here. A lot of people don't.
And if I may I make a comment?
Be real quick, because I have one more question I want to get to. Ms. Solovic, and I hope I pronounced that right. In the South, we don't do over one syllable usually. But first of all, I want to thank you for your mother, and again, it goes back to family and your father's service to this great nation. That's very important to me, and I think that our veteran, which we haven't talked about a lot, but I like to give these guys and girls opportunities to proceed forward, because they paid their debt to this nation, and anytime we can forward their agenda and help them to be successful a life after the military, that's great. But can you elaborate a little bit on the Department of Labor's overtime rule and how that's impacted your business and other businesses, please?
Certainly, I get a lot of concern from small businesses, especially with the increase to the threshold of $50,000. It will cost jobs in many, many small businesses. And just also, not even just the level of increase, which is huge, but the fact that the complexity of the guidelines is very, very difficult for small businesses to follow and to know who's exempt and who's non-exempt and how it applies. And when I mentioned my father's ambulance service, how do you say, oh, well, today it was an ambulance, tomorrow it was a hearse, and who worked when, and just the complexity of it was overwhelming to him. And my other concern is, and I hear this from many small businesses, in smaller parts of the country, particularly the Midwest and the area of the country I grew up in, $50,000 in Manhattan is nothing. $50,000 in Fredericktown, Missouri is a heck of a lot of money. I just sold my family's home. My father's now in assisted living. It was a big house, 5,000 square feet, 4 bedrooms, three full baths, 2 half baths, a finished basement, and an extra lot for $116,000. So it is a different world. We can't make arbitrary decisions like that. We need to give small business owners the flexibilities to manage their business in the way they deem appropriate. We are not slave drivers and greedmongers like we saw in the industrial era. We do want to care for our employees. We want to care for our families. We want to give back to our communities. And the statistics on how much more a small business gives back to their community as opposed to a large chain company is significant. So we're trying to be good. We're trying to do the right things. We just need government out of our business.
You know, if I could just add one thing to that, I cannot stress enough the problem with complexity, right? People are happy to follow the rules, but sometimes it is hard to know what the rules are. Then you spend money on lawyers, money on accountants, and time that you could be spend marketing or talking to your customers to just figure out if, in fact, you're following the rules correctly.
Thank
And
you.
if you make a mistake, it's costly.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. The gentleman.
I yield back, Mr.
Expired.
Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask this question of Ms. Emerson. Hearing the discussion on the challenges, there has been a shift in the development of small businesses to the use of incubators. What does it mean to startups to have that kind of business when you're saying you need support? So what's the role and how can we support the incubators if that's the way to provide you with the support you need?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that question because I won a business plan competition that put me in a business incubator and actually ended up staying in there for 5 years. So I can talk very much about the value of incubators. I think that the number one thing you fight when you start a business is loneliness and feeling like you're by yourself. So the fact that you can walk down the hall and commiserate with someone else that, you know, is trying to figure out how to get paid by a vendor, I think that is very important to have a sense of community. What I also found valuable in an incubator is that, you know, education can be done right in the same building. You know, networks can be set up. Potential funders that are interested in the businesses in the building can come in and see a cadre of businesses, not just one type. And so for me, the Enterprise Center in Philadelphia is where I was located, and that turned out to be such an incredible proving ground for me in my business, and it made all the difference in the world because back when I started my business back in 1999, being a home-based business wasn't cool. Like you were like if you were working out of your basement, people didn't take you seriously like you were in business. You know, so when I won my business plan competition, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm going to work every day. You know, I got a parking space. You know, so it makes you feel nowadays everybody's telecommuting, everybody's working from home.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that, you know, almost 20 years ago. So I think it's a great thing to do.
I appreciate that. I think we as a small business administration should really spend some time supporting that. I want to ask Ms. Ramberg, one of the greatest areas of success in my home state in Metro Detroit has been the rise of women, women-owned small businesses. And according to the U.S. Census and the Small Business Administration, Michigan ranks among the top 10 states and the number of new small businesses operated or open by men and women who are self-employed. How can we sustain the growth rates among women in small business? And as a small business owner yourself, what are some, you already outlined some of those, but what would you advise us on this committee and how we can do a better job with women?
Again, I think it's truly about mentorship. We do have issues, right? There are still many women out there who say that they go to find funding and they're discriminated against. I'm quite sure that is true, but I think that if you are a woman who's going for venture funding and you talk to another woman who's been to that same person and asked for money, you will know what to look for, right? Again, I believe the answer is quite simple, which is just get people together, the experienced with the inexperienced. Get networks of women. There's a organization called the We Festival in New York City. It just happened, and it was for women entrepreneurs. And the excitement around it and the sharing of knowledge was huge. 10,000 women from Goldman Sachs, again, another organization. If you just get people together, I just went to a dinner. It was 20 women brought together from different industries by somebody. And at the end of the dinner, we went around and every single person had to ask something they needed help with. 3 women at that table said, I need help raising money for my company. And guess what? The next day, they were contacted with people. Now, I don't know if they'll get the money or not, right? It'll depend if the businesses are good. But I'm fortunate that I have this network in New York City. But if we can create those same networks for people so that you feel comfortable saying, I need this, and someone out there says, okay, let me help you.
Mr. Ray, and this is the last question. What are some of the challenges that you face in the competition with the corporates? I hear that often. I'm a small business. I'm just keep jumping up, raising my hand. Look at me, I can do it. What are some of the challenges there?
It is very competitive. For example, I produce events, or I have a magazine. There's a lot of bigger companies than myself. And I think that sometimes it's the wherewithal to keep pushing through. I think that's one. I think, two, it's the business owner not having the education to talk the language of the large business person. And that's what I've learned, which has helped me. So I'm talking to a big company, I won't mention them here, but big courier, or big financial services company, big bank. There's ways I have to talk. There's documents I have to have. They're risk averse. They don't know who I am from Adam or Eve, for that matter. So those are the two things that I found that will be helpful. The small business owner must learn to talk the language of big business and not think small, as you've alluded to. That's the way to succeed.
Thank you.
I hear clearly the need for information and training, and I love the analysis of not being alone and having access to those. So thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Hardy, who's the subcommittee chairman of Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I must say that I believe that Mr. Ray, your father and mine, must have hung out together, because my dad used to tell me, son, you can do it and like it, or you can do it and hate it. Either way you're going to do it. Your attitude determines.
Yeah, I think they did hang on together. I think so.
Your altitude. So all of you seem to have great attitude. I think that is part of the success. Myself, being a small business person in the past, had some successes, had some challenges. One of the challenges that I believe have caused a lot of that you brought up, Mr. Ray, and also Ms. Ramberg, that the federal government and regulations, this duplicative regulations coming from not just from the federal government, from the state governments, from the county governments, the city governments. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Mr. Ray, with your conversation there?
Absolutely. Sure. What I think, as you said, is that there's a labyrinth of different things. If I do it right this way, it's wrong this way. Right this way, wrong this way. And the best example I can give, I think, being, again, with New York City, my backyard, I know the New York City Department of Small Business Services, I think it's called Fast Track. I don't recall the exact name, but they have a system where they set up where you go to one place and the organizations, the entities are all in kind of one place. So that's an example of something that can help, where you go there, fill out a form, other people in the civil servants are trained to help you navigate through that. Because if you're not trained or educated, and all of us are just experts in what we're doing, it's tough. It was tough to get in this building, much less, being a small business owner.
I think it's clarity and knowing where the information lies, right? So in San Francisco, for instance, right now you need to put a poster up, a new employee poster up right now. So my company works with a PEO who tells us, hey, here's the poster, go put it up. If we didn't work with them, we wouldn't know it existed, right? That is a tiny example of things that happen all the time. And so the amount of time and energy just trying to understand what the regulations are, trying to work with the government to get around them, if there is a way to do it, if it doesn't work with your company, and then comply with them. Again, the exempt rules they're very complicated. It seems like they're easy, but it's not. They're people who don't exactly fit into one side or the other, and there's no place to go ask. If you go ask someone, they say, "Oh, you got to go figure it out yourselves," and having that answer as a small business owner when this is not your core business is incredibly frustrating and time-consuming.
Thank you. Ms. Solvik, you mentioned in your testimony about the overtime rule as being a backbreaker. Mr. Knight and myself led the letter to we brought over 100 congressional members together to sign this letter to try to rethink how we're doing this. So can you elaborate a little bit on some of the challenges of this being a backbreaking also, and one size fits all doesn't necessarily fit?
Right, I think that's pretty simple right now, just the way you said it. It's not the $50,000 necessarily. It is the non-exempt versus the exempt, the paperwork, the tracking, and as I said, in parts of the country, $50,000 is a lot of money to make. You're not victimizing a low-wage earner. So I really think that taking time to look at regulations such as that and look at the true impact on a small business and the community. If a small business has to cut jobs and they're on Main Street, it hurts that community. And where else do people go to get jobs? You don't have big industry or big companies coming in there. So it costs the entire community once those few jobs are gone.
I'd like to touch on a little different subject. Somebody brought up, and I can't think it might have been you, Mrs. Solvik, but Ms. Solvik, but had to do with the length of pay, especially on federal government jobs. It's okay. The challenge is, I've seen myself, it jeopardizes small businesses. I was usually the larger business that I have to wait for 90 to 120 days from federal government to get paid, which means in turn it makes it tougher for me to get the finance to be able to pay my vendors, and that trickle down. Any suggestions on how we fix that here federally?
Well, I think you just have to make it a law. Folks have to get paid net 30. I mean, I think honestly, it's such a challenge because cash flow is king in a small business. And if you have employees, you got to make payroll, regardless of when you get paid. And I think that because it's so difficult for small business owners to get lines of credit, I mean, even if you qualify for a line of credit, the most you're going to get is 10% of your gross revenue. So for a business doing $500,000, that's a $50,000 line. Well, if the government owes you $180,000, you know what I mean? Like it just strangles small businesses if they can't get paid on time.
And then that 10% retention on top of that ends up strangling somebody when you don't even have that kind
And
of
then by
profit
the
margin.
time you get the money, it's not even the same value if you had to go out and factor the invoice or had to go to one of these, payday lenders for small business, which is what I call these cash flow lenders. I mean, it's just strangling people's margins, and people aren't able to make money because they can't get paid on time. It is a huge issue, but it's not just a huge issue in the federal government. I think that there's some MOUs that go out with corporations, because I have found that the larger the corporation is, the harder it is to get paid too. So it's not just a federal government problem, it's a problem all over the place, and everyone thinks they can pay a small business last or late.
May I underline something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to underline that. Thank you for asking the question. Is that just to underline, it's a double problem because again, your money comes in late, and you have big checks, 20,000, 30,000. Well, Melinda has 100,000 checks, and you have to pay out. I just got an email last night from one of my vendors who I work with. Ramon, I sent you an invoice for $1,000. I need that money. Can you get it to me? I'm going to forward that money to him tonight. But the money that's coming in from me is going to take 45, 30, 90 days. So I just want to underline it. It's jamming me up.
I would say when it comes to the corporations, I mean, even in the agreements that I sign with them now, they'll just put 90 days.
Absolutely.
And you've got to float that money, and it's tough on us.
The gentleman's time's expired. The gentlelady from American Samoa, Matarawagan, is recognized for 5 minutes, and she's a subcommittee chairman on health and technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been really fascinating. I've learned so much today. I have a question for all of you. It's just the same question. Maybe we could start with Ms. Ramberg. What are some of the things that can be done to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs?
I think we are inspiring them. I think if you talk to millennials, if you've been into a WeWork office recently, it is filled with people who are inspired to start businesses. What we need to do is we need to keep them inspired, and we need to keep them realistic, I believe. And so we need to talk about the challenges around small business, and we need to give education. It's the same as we've been talking about here, but I think when I started my show 10 years ago, there were organizations focused on small business and entrepreneurship that were shutting down. Now there is a cult of entrepreneurship, and I think people are very excited to start their own small businesses. And so we just need to provide them the resources to do it. I think they want to.
So thank you for the question. My answer to that would be, I think, just keep doing more of what we're doing here and keep providing platforms. I mean, the four of us, we've reached a level of success, but I think that there's that cult of entrepreneurship, and I think what can we do to go to the inner cities? Those who are not yet inspired, who think they can't do it, I would just add that. How can we go maybe to small islands, et cetera, and help inspire them more and more and more? So thank you for the question.
I agree. I also believe that I've always told people children emulate their parents, so they behave and do things what they see growing up. I think the same is true for young people today. let's lead by example. Let's give them opportunities, even in grade school, to understand what entrepreneurship is and how fun it is to run your own business and be your own boss and make money, and that there are options other than traditional work paths for them to be successful in this country.
I would like to echo the same. I think it's just about highlighting success stories, big and small, highlighting youth entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, veteran-owned entrepreneurs, and making sure that, National Small Business Week is not just PR, right? It's really about highlighting the successes and honoring people who are doing this work, and so that people can say, I want to get that award one day. I think also looking at MedWeek and putting some real teeth and resources around MedWeek and highlighting minority women entrepreneurs during those times is really important, because people look at that and see that as something of value. Everyone likes to, hear their name called and get a little plaque with their name on it. So I think that more of that really will go a long way of making people feel appreciated and acknowledged, and other people inspiring to feel the same way.
May I add one more thing to this? May I answer one more? I just wanted to add, ma'am, and say also that I think that, not to be the contrarian, but small business entrepreneurship is difficult. So I think it could be interesting to highlight it, but so people can see, you know what, this is not for me. Let me go, I don't know, work in Congress or something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just teasing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
We hope you are. Yeah. The gentlelady yields back. So I think all the questions have been asked and answered. And as chair of the committee, I just want to thank you all for your testimony here today. It's been very inspiring. I know that we've all learned a lot. In fact, we've decided to have you all come back every week from now on. Yeah, but we really do appreciate it. And I think Chris Gibson, the gentleman from New York who's left at this point, but I think he mentioned he was going to have his daughter watch this, who's an aspiring entrepreneur maybe down the road. And I would recommend that our crack staff tries to get this out, because I think a lot of small businesses all over America, whether they're thinking about starting a small business or whether they already have one and they are looking for ways to improve it, I think there were just pearls of wisdom here that we don't want to just go off into the ether. You've all really done a great job, and thank you so much. I think you've done your country a great service. You really have. So thank you very much for this morning, and I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there's no further business to come before the hearing, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. So. Go.